My name is Rashid Al-Mansouri, and in 6 months I lost everything. My company, my wealth, my reputation, my future, as my business empire collapsed from massive financial failures and bankruptcy. But in the ruins of that disaster, I discovered Jesus Christ in ways prosperity had never allowed me to see him, and he began rebuilding not just my business, but my entire life on a foundation that could never fail. I was born in 1977 in Doha, Qatar, into a middle-class family. My father worked in government administration, and we lived comfortably, but without significant wealth. From young age, I was ambitious and entrepreneurial, always looking for opportunities to build something bigger than the modest life I had known. I studied business administration at Qatar University, graduating in 1999, just as Qatar was beginning its massive economic transformation. The country was investing heavily in infrastructure, real estate, and diversification beyond oil and gas. I saw opportunities everywhere and was determined to capitalize on them. At age 23, I started my first business, a small construction supply company serving the building boom in Doha. I worked relentlessly, underbidding competitors, building relationships with contractors, and reinvesting every profit back into expansion. Within 3 years, my small supply company had grown significantly, and I was making serious money. By age 30 in 2007, I had diversified into real estate development, logistics, and import-export operations. I leveraged my construction industry connections to identify opportunities, took calculated risks on property developments, and built a reputation for delivering projects on time and under budget. My business empire was growing rapidly. The next decade was extraordinary success. By 2017, at age 40, my holding company controlled interests in construction, real estate, logistics, retail, and investment portfolios. My personal net worth was approximately $1.8 billion, and I was recognized as one of Qatar's most successful self-made businessmen. I had everything: wealth, status, influence, security. My success was built entirely on my own capability, strategic thinking, and relentless work ethic. I was proud of having built this empire from nothing, using intelligence and determination to create wealth my father could never have imagined. I attended mosque regularly, maintained Islamic identity for business and social reasons, but my real faith was in my own abilities. I married at 28 to a woman from another business family, and we had 3 children. My family lived in luxury, mansion in Doha's most exclusive neighborhood, luxury cars, private schools for children, international vacations. My wife enjoyed the wealth I provided, and my children grew up with every privilege. But underneath the success was growing emptiness I couldn't name. I had achieved everything I set out to accomplish, accumulated wealth beyond my early dreams, built an empire that employed hundreds of people. Yet I felt hollow, constantly anxious about maintaining what I had built, never satisfied regardless of how much I gained. I assumed this emptiness was normal for successful people, that ambition always created hunger for more. But in early 2019, something would happen that would expose the emptiness and begin showing me what was truly missing from my life of wealth and achievement. In February 2019, I traveled to London for business meetings regarding a major real estate investment. The deal involved acquiring a commercial property portfolio worth £200 million, and I was meeting with British consultants and investors to finalize terms. One of the key consultants was a Christian businessman named Michael Thompson. He had excellent reputation in international property investment, and several trusted contacts had recommended him. I didn't care about his religious background. I cared about his expertise and track record. Over several days of meetings, I was impressed by Michael's competence, but also struck by something else. He had integrity and peace that seemed disconnected from business outcomes. When negotiations hit obstacles, he remained calm. When deals looked uncertain, he maintained perspective. He conducted business with complete honesty, even when deception might have been profitable. One evening, Michael invited me to dinner at his home rather than another business restaurant. I accepted, curious about his life outside the boardroom. His home was nice but modest compared to the luxury I lived in. His wife and children welcomed me warmly with genuine kindness rather than formal politeness. During dinner, I asked Michael directly what gave him the peace and integrity I had observed. He smiled and said his Christian faith shaped everything about how he lived and worked. Following Jesus meant conducting business with complete honesty, treating people with dignity, and recognizing that wealth was temporary stewardship rather than ultimate treasure. Michael spoke about Jesus naturally, not as abstract theology, but as personal relationship that transformed his daily life. He explained that knowing Jesus gave him purpose beyond accumulating money and peace that didn't depend on business success. He said that following Christ meant building life on foundation that couldn't fail, even when businesses did. His words challenged me deeply. I had built my entire identity on business success, accumulated wealth as measure of my worth, and found my security in what I owned. But Michael had something I didn't: genuine peace, purpose beyond profit, and foundation that transcended market fluctuations. Before I left that evening, Michael gave me a Quran and a Bible, both in Arabic. He said if I was curious about truth, I should read both carefully and see which one revealed God more accurately. He warned that possessing a Bible could be sensitive in Qatar, but said truth was worth the risk of discovery. I took both books, uncertain why I was accepting something so potentially dangerous. But Michael's testimony had awakened spiritual hunger I didn't know I had. I had everything money could buy, but he had something money couldn't purchase: genuine relationship with God that brought peace regardless of circumstances. I returned to Doha with those books hidden in my luggage, not knowing they would soon transform my understanding of God, success, and what actually matters in life. Within weeks, everything I had built would begin collapsing, and those books would be the only foundation that remained solid when my empire crumbled. In March 2019, just weeks after returning from London, my business empire began experiencing serious problems. A major real estate development project I had invested heavily in faced unexpected regulatory issues that halted construction. The delays triggered penalty clauses in contracts, costing millions in lost revenue and legal fees. Simultaneously, one of my largest clients in the logistics division declared bankruptcy, leaving massive unpaid invoices that I had counted on for cash flow. The sudden loss created liquidity problems across multiple divisions of my holding company. I had leveraged my assets aggressively to fund expansion, taking loans against properties and using credit lines to pursue multiple opportunities simultaneously. This strategy had worked brilliantly during growth years, multiplying returns. But now, with major projects stalled and clients failing, the leverage became a crushing burden. Banks that had eagerly extended credit during good times suddenly became nervous. They demanded immediate repayment of short-term loans, called in credit lines, and raised interest rates on remaining debt. The financial pressure escalated rapidly. I tried desperately to stabilize the situation, selling assets to raise cash, negotiating with creditors, seeking emergency financing. But the problems multiplied faster than solutions. Rumors spread through Qatar's business community that Al-Mansouri's empire was in trouble, and rumors became self-fulfilling prophecy as partners distanced themselves and opportunities evaporated. By May 2019, the situation was catastrophic. I couldn't meet debt obligations, couldn't pay contractors and suppliers, couldn't maintain operations across multiple divisions. My financial advisors projected total insolvency within months unless I found massive capital injection that no one was willing to provide. During this nightmare, I began reading the Bible Michael had given me. Desperate for any hope or wisdom, I started with the Gospels. I encountered Jesus in ways that challenged everything I believed about success, wealth, and what constitutes a good life. Jesus taught that life didn't consist in abundance of possessions, that you couldn't serve both God and money, that storing up earthly treasure was ultimately futile. He warned that whoever tried to save their life would lose it, but whoever lost their life for his sake would find it. These teachings struck directly at the empire I was desperately trying to save. I read about Jesus meeting a rich young ruler who had everything but lacked one thing: willingness to surrender his wealth and follow Christ. When the man walked away sad, Jesus said it was harder for a rich person to enter God's kingdom than for a camel to go through needle's eye. I realized I was that rich man, clinging to wealth and success as my identity, security, and worth. My empire was collapsing, and I was discovering that everything I had built my life on was crumbling. But maybe Jesus was suggesting losing everything was the only way to gain what actually mattered. In June 2019, as bankruptcy became inevitable, I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ, not knowing he was about to teach me lessons about true riches that prosperity had made impossible to learn. In July 2019, I officially declared bankruptcy. My business empire that had been worth $1.8 billion was liquidated to pay creditors. Properties were sold, assets seized, contracts terminated. Within weeks, Everything I had built over 20 years was gone. The Al-Mansouri business empire ceased to exist. The emotional devastation was crushing. I had defined myself by my business success, measured my worth by my net worth, found my identity in being a self-made billionaire. Now I was a bankruptcy case, a cautionary tale, a failed businessman who had lost everything. The shame was overwhelming, especially in Qatar's status-conscious business culture, where success was everything and failure was disgrace. My wife's response made everything worse. She had married a successful businessman and enjoyed the lifestyle my wealth provided. Learning that we had lost everything, that we would have to sell our mansion and live modestly, that our children would lose their privileges, she couldn't handle it. Within weeks, she filed for divorce, unwilling to remain married to a man who had destroyed the comfortable life she had known. My adult children were also devastated and angry. They blamed me for reckless business decisions, for risking everything through aggressive leverage, for destroying their inheritance and comfortable future. Our relationships became strained and distant. Friends and business associates who had surrounded me during success disappeared during failure. People who had sought my advice, attended my events, and called me frequently stopped contacting me. I discovered that most of my relationships had been based on what I could provide rather than who I actually was. The loss of everything, wealth, business, marriage, reputation, relationships, left me with nothing except the faith in Jesus I had recently discovered. And ironically, losing everything created space to understand what Jesus had been trying to teach me all along. I began attending an underground church in Doha, secret believers who met in homes since open Christianity was restricted in Qatar. These Christians welcomed me warmly, not caring about my former wealth or current bankruptcy. They valued me simply as brother in Christ, loved by God regardless of financial status. For the first time in my life, I experienced relationships not based on what I could provide. These believers helped with practical needs, prayed for me, supported me emotionally, and reminded me that my worth came from being God's child rather than from business achievements. I also discovered that my conversion and subsequent bankruptcy gave me testimony that wealthy Muslims found compelling. Several business associates who had known me during success reached out privately, asking what had changed. How could I have peace after losing everything? These conversations created opportunities to share about Jesus that my previous success had never provided. One wealthy businessman said, "Rashid, you lost $1.8 billion and you seem more at peace now than when you had everything. What happened to you?" I explained that I had discovered Jesus Christ was better than my empire, that knowing him provided security no market crash could destroy, that losing everything had freed me to gain what actually mattered. Some thought I was insane, but several began asking serious questions about Christianity, curious about a faith that could sustain someone through total financial collapse. My bankruptcy was becoming a platform for gospel conversations that success had made impossible. In the months following bankruptcy, I started rebuilding my life on a completely different foundation. I had no business, no wealth, no status, just faith in Jesus and determination to build whatever came next on him rather than on my own capability. I began working as business consultant, using expertise gained over 20 years to help other companies solve problems. The work was humble compared to running my own empire, but it provided income and allowed me to use my skills. More importantly, I conducted this work with integrity I had sometimes compromised during my empire-building years. Something unexpected began happening. Clients specifically sought me out because of my testimony. They wanted to work with someone whose character had been tested through losing everything and who now operated on Christian principles rather than just profit maximization. My bankruptcy, which I had thought would destroy my reputation permanently, actually became credential demonstrating that my values weren't dependent on personal gain. Within a year, my consulting practice was thriving. I wasn't rebuilding a billion-dollar empire, but I was generating substantial income while maintaining integrity and peace that my previous success had never provided. God was multiplying my work in ways my own strategies never could have accomplished. I also began working with Christian organizations that helped Muslim businesspeople discover Jesus. My story, successful billionaire who lost everything but found Christ was better than wealth, resonated powerfully with wealthy Muslims who privately wrestled with spiritual emptiness despite material abundance. Several businessmen came to faith after hearing my testimony. They saw that I had actually possessed what they were pursuing, discovered it was empty, lost it all, and found something infinitely better in Jesus. My journey gave them permission to question whether wealth was actually the answer to life's deepest needs. In 2021, 2 years after bankruptcy, I remarried, a Christian woman who loved me for who I was rather than what I owned. Our relationship was built on shared faith and commitment to following Jesus regardless of financial circumstances. I discovered marriage could be partnership in kingdom purposes rather than just wealth maintenance. Today, 5 years after losing my empire, I have more than I did at my peak. Not in money, though God has provided well, but in what actually matters. I have genuine relationship with God through Jesus Christ. I have peace that doesn't depend on bank accounts. I have purpose beyond accumulation. I have relationships based on love rather than utility. My net worth today is a fraction of what it was. But I testify that knowing Jesus is worth more than $1.8 billion. Losing my empire was the best thing that ever happened because it forced me to discover what Jesus had been trying to teach me. That life doesn't consist in abundance of possessions, that you cannot serve both God and money, and that whoever loses his life for Christ's sake finds what he was actually searching for all along. I built an empire on my own strength and watched it collapse. Then Jesus rebuilt my life on his foundation, and what he builds cannot fail, cannot be taken away, and satisfies in ways earthly success never could. That is the multiplication that matters, losing everything to gain Christ, the treasure worth selling everything to obtain.